Ela chorou quando ouviu as más notícias.
She cried when she heard the bad news. She cried when she heard the bad news.
Eu sempre choro quando assisto a filmes tristes.
I always cry when I watch sad movies. I always cry when I watch sad movies.
Eles choraram lágrimas de alegria no casamento.
They cried tears of joy at their wedding. They cried tears of joy at their wedding.
O bebê começou a chorar quando estava com fome.
The baby started to cry when it was hungry. The baby started to cry when it was hungry.
Ele chorou por ajuda quando se perdeu na floresta.
He cried for help when he got lost in the woods. He cried for help when he got lost in the woods.
Ela chora toda vez que vê esse filme.
She cries every time she sees that movie. She cries every time she sees that movie.
Ele chorou quando descobriu o que tinha passado no exame.
He cried when he found out he had passed the exam. He cried when he found out he had passed the exam.
Eles choraram durante o discurso emocionado.
They cried during the emotional speech. They cried during the emotional speech.
Eu não quero chorar, mas não consigo evitar.
I don't want to cry, but I can't help it. I don't want to cry, but I can't help it.
Ela chorou baixinho em seu quarto depois da discussão.
She cried quietly in her room after the argument. She cried quietly in her room after the argument.
A criança chorou porque não conseguia encontrar seu brinquedo.
The child cried because he couldn't find his toy. The child cried because he couldn't find his toy.
Eu choro sempre que me sinto sobrecarregada.
I cry whenever I feel overwhelmed. I cry whenever I feel overwhelmed.
Os dois choraram durante a despedida no aeroporto.
They both cried during their goodbye at the airport. They both cried during their goodbye at the airport.
Ele chorou alto quando ouviu as notícias trágicas.
He cried out loud when he heard the tragic news. He cried out loud when he heard the tragic news.
Ela chorou de felicidade quando viu sua família.
She cried with happiness when she saw her family. She cried with happiness when she saw her family.
Eu chorei a noite toda depois do término.
I cried all night after the breakup. I cried all night after the breakup.
Ele não conseguia parar de chorar depois do acidente.
He couldn't stop crying after the accident. He couldn't stop crying after the accident.
Ela chorou por horas depois de ouvir as notícias tristes.
She cried for hours after hearing the sad news. She cried for hours after hearing the sad news.
A menina chorou quando perdeu seu bicho de pelúcia favorito.
The girl cried when she lost her favorite stuffed animal. The girl cried when she lost her favorite stuffed animal.
Ele não chorou no funeral, mas ficou profundamente triste.
He didn't cry at the funeral, but he felt deeply sad. He didn't cry at the funeral, but he felt deeply sad.
Muitas vezes choro quando sinto nostalgia da minha infância.
I often cry when I feel nostalgic about my childhood. I often cry when I feel nostalgic about my childhood.
Eles choraram juntos quando se reencontraram depois de anos separados.
They cried together when they reunited after years apart. They cried together when they reunited after years apart.
Ela chorou lágrimas de alívio quando os resultados dos testes deram negativo.
She cried tears of relief when the test results came back negative. She cried tears of relief when the test results came back negative.
Ele chorou como bebê após o ferimento.
He cried like a baby after the injury. He cried like a baby after the injury.
Ela tentou não chorar durante o filme, mas não conseguiu segurar as lágrimas.
She tried not to cry during the movie, but she couldn't hold back her tears. She tried not to cry during the movie, but she couldn't hold back her tears.
Ele chorou quando lhe disseram que não poderia mais brincar lá fora.
He cried when he was told he couldn't play outside anymore. He cried when he was told he couldn't play outside anymore.
Eu sempre choro quando ouço essa música.
I always cry when I hear that song. I always cry when I hear that song.
O garotinho chorou por sua mãe quando se perdeu.
The little boy cried for his mother when he was lost. The little boy cried for his mother when he was lost.
Ela chora toda vez que fica frustrada.
She cries every time she gets frustrated. She cries every time she gets frustrated.
Ele chorou de frustração quando não conseguiu resolver o quebra-cabeça.
He cried out of frustration when he couldn't solve the puzzle. He cried out of frustration when he couldn't solve the puzzle.
A criança chorou de medo durante a tempestade.
The child cried out in fear during the thunderstorm. The child cried out in fear during the thunderstorm.
Ela chorou ao ver o pôr do sol em seu último dia de férias.
She cried as she watched the sunset on her last day of vacation. She cried as she watched the sunset on her last day of vacation.
Eu chorei lágrimas de felicidade quando ouvi as boas notícias.
I cried happy tears when I heard the good news. I cried happy tears when I heard the good news.
Ele tentou não chorar durante a despedida emocionante.
He tried not to cry during the emotional farewell. He tried not to cry during the emotional farewell.
Ela chorou porque seu time favorito perdeu o jogo.
She cried because her favorite team lost the game. She cried because her favorite team lost the game.
Eles choraram lágrimas de alívio quando a equipe de resgate chegou.
They cried tears of relief when the rescue team arrived. They cried tears of relief when the rescue team arrived.
Eu tive que chorar quando recebi um presente tão inesperado.
I had to cry when I received such an unexpected gift. I had to cry when I received such an unexpected gift.
Ele chorou quando viu os danos causados pela tempestade.
He cried when he saw the damage. He cried when he saw the damage caused by the storm.
A mãe chorou quando viu seu filho se apresentar no palco.
The mother cried when she saw her child perform on stage. The mother cried when she saw her child perform on stage.
Eu choro muito quando me sinto sozinha.
I cry a lot when I feel lonely. I cry a lot when I feel lonely.
Ela chorou por horas após a morte de seu animal de estimação.
She cried for hours after the death of her pet. She cried for hours after the death of her pet.
Ele não queria chorar na frente de seus amigos.
He didn't want to cry in front of his friends. He didn't want to cry in front of his friends.
Os dois choraram depois de ouvir a história de partir o coração.
They both cried after hearing the heartbreaking story. They both cried after hearing the heartbreaking story.
Ela chorou quando abriu seu presente de aniversário.
She cried when she opened her birthday present. She cried when she opened her birthday present.
Ele chorou ao se despedir de sua casa de infância.
He cried as he said goodbye to his childhood home. He cried as he said goodbye to his childhood home.
Eu chorei quando percebi o quanto sentia falta da minha família.
I cried when I realized how much I missed my family. I cried when I realized how much I missed my family.
Ela chora toda vez que lê aquela carta.
She cries every time she reads that letter. She cries every time she reads that letter.
Ele chorou de alegria quando seu time ganhou o campeonato.
He cried with joy when his team won the championship. He cried with joy when his team won the championship.
Eu chorei de alívio quando os resultados dos testes foram normais.
I cried out of relief when the test results were normal. I cried out of relief when the test results were normal.
Ela chorou de frustração quando o projeto não saiu como planejado.
She cried in frustration when the project didn't go as planned. She cried in frustration when the project didn't go as planned.
A garotinha chorou por sua boneca perdida.
The little girl cried for her lost doll. The little girl cried for her lost doll.
Eu não consegui evitar chorar depois de ouvir a linda música.
I couldn't help but cry after hearing the beautiful music. I couldn't help but cry after hearing the beautiful music.
Ele chorou de alegria quando sua proposta foi aceita.
He cried with joy when his proposal was accepted. He cried with joy when his proposal was accepted.
Ela chorou quando ouviu o sinal final na escola.
She cried when she heard the final bell at school. She cried when she heard the final bell at school.
Eles choraram enquanto assistiam à exibição de fogos de artifício.
They cried as they watched the fireworks display. They cried as they watched the fireworks display.
Ele chorou quando descobriu que seria pai.
He cried when he found out he was going to be a father. He cried when he found out he was going to be a father.
Eu chorei depois de ouvir o discurso na cerimônia de formatura.
I cried after hearing the speech at the graduation ceremony. I cried after hearing the speech at the graduation ceremony.
Ela chorou quando descobriu que seu livro favorito estava sendo adaptado para um filme.
She cried when she found out her favorite book was being adapted into a movie. She cried when she found out her favorite book was being adapted into a movie.
Ele não chorou, mas ficou profundamente comovido com a apresentação.
He didn't cry, but he was deeply moved by the performance. He didn't cry, but he was deeply moved by the performance.
Ela chora sempre que se sente tomada pela emoção.
She cries whenever she feels overwhelmed with emotion. She cries whenever she feels overwhelmed with emotion.
Eu chorei quando li a carta do meu melhor amigo.
I cried when I read the letter from my best friend. I cried when I read the letter from my best friend.
Ele chorou alto quando percebeu que tinha sido deixado de fora.
He cried out loud when he realized he had been left out. He cried out loud when he realized he had been left out.
Ela chorou por dias após a perda repentina de sua mãe.
She cried for days after the sudden loss of her mother. She cried for days after the sudden loss of her mother.
Ele chorou por ajuda quando caiu no rio.
He cried for help when he fell into the river. He cried for help when he fell into the river.
Eu choro quando vejo algo lindo que toca meu coração.
I cry when I see something beautiful that touches my heart. I cry when I see something beautiful that touches my heart.
Ela chorou depois de saber que seu amigo tinha se mudado.
She cried after hearing that her friend had moved away. She cried after hearing that her friend had moved away.
Ele chorou de alegria quando se tornou pai.
He cried out of joy when he became a father. He cried out of joy when he became a father.
Eu tentei não chorar durante o filme, mas foi muito triste.
I tried not to cry during the movie, but it was so sad. I tried not to cry during the movie, but it was so sad.
O bebê chorou até que sua mãe o pegou.
The baby cried until its mother picked it up. The baby cried until its mother picked it up.
Ela chorou porque não queria deixar seus amigos para trás.
She cried because she didn't want to leave her friends behind. She cried because she didn't want to leave her friends behind.
Ele chorou quando seu animal de estimação de infância faleceu.
He cried when his childhood pet passed away. He cried when his childhood pet passed away.
Eu sempre choro durante a cena final daquele filme.
I always cry during the final scene of that movie. I always cry during the final scene of that movie.
Ela chorou de felicidade quando recebeu a oferta de emprego.
She cried out of happiness when she got the job offer. She cried out of happiness when she got the job offer.
Ele chorou baixinho enquanto olhava as fotos antigas.
He cried quietly while looking at the old photos. He cried quietly while looking at the old photos.
Eu chorei por ajuda quando não consegui encontrar o caminho de casa.
I cried for help when I couldn't find my way home. I cried for help when I couldn't find my way home.
Ela chora quando se emociona com uma história tocante.
She cries when she is moved by a touching story. She cries when she is moved by a touching story.
Ele chorou depois de saber que sua banda favorita estava se separando.
He cried after hearing his favorite band was breaking up. He cried after hearing his favorite band was breaking up.
Eles choraram enquanto assistiam ao final emocionante da série de TV.
They cried as they watched the emotional finale of the TV series. They cried as they watched the emotional finale of the TV series.
Eu choro toda vez que visito a casa dos meus avós.
I cry every time I visit my grandparents' house. I cry every time I visit my grandparents' house.
Ela chorou quando recebeu a promoção no emprego.
She cried when she got the job promotion. She cried when she got the job promotion.
Ele chorou quando viu a devastação após o incêndio.
He cried when he saw the devastation after the fire. He cried when he saw the devastation after the fire.
Eu não conseguia parar de chorar quando vi o quanto meus amigos se importavam comigo.
I couldn't stop crying when I saw how much my friends cared for me. I couldn't stop crying when I saw how much my friends cared for me.
Ela chorou porque seus planos fracassaram.
She cried because her plans had fallen through. She cried because her plans had fallen through.
Ele chorou quando percebeu o quanto sentia falta dela.
He cried when he realized how much he had missed her. He cried when he realized how much he had missed her.
Eu choro toda vez que ouço a história daquele evento trágico.
I cry every time I hear the story of that tragic event. I cry every time I hear the story of that tragic event.
Ela chorou enquanto abraçava sua amiga para se despedir.
She cried as she hugged her friend goodbye. She cried as she hugged her friend goodbye.
Ele chorou quando descobriu que foi aceito no programa.
He cried when he found out that he was accepted into the program. He cried when he found out that he was accepted into the program.
Eu chorei quando terminei de ler aquele romance emocionante.
I cried when I finished reading that emotional novel. I cried when I finished reading that emotional novel.
Ela chorou depois de ouvir as notícias sobre sua celebridade favorita.
She cried after hearing the news about her favorite celebrity. She cried after hearing the news about her favorite celebrity.
Ele não chorou, mas seus olhos estavam marejados quando ele saiu do hospital.
He didn't cry, but his eyes were teary when he left the hospital. He didn't cry, but his eyes were teary when he left the hospital.
Eu sempre choro quando vejo algo realmente tocante nas notícias.
I always cry when I see something really touching on the news. I always cry when I see something really touching on the news.
Eles choraram juntos, percebendo que seu sonho havia se tornado realidade.
They cried together, realizing their dream had come true. They cried together, realizing their dream had come true.
Ele chorou de alegria quando se reencontrou com seu irmão há muito perdido.
He cried in joy when he reunited with his long-lost sibling. He cried in joy when he reunited with his long-lost sibling.
Eu chorei lágrimas de felicidade quando vi a gentileza de estranhos.
I cried tears of happiness when I saw the kindness of strangers. I cried tears of happiness when I saw the kindness of strangers.
Ela chorou quando viu quanto sua família havia se sacrificado por ela.
She cried when she saw how much her family had sacrificed for her. She cried when she saw how much her family had sacrificed for her.
Ele chorou depois de ouvir o sincero pedido de desculpas.
He cried after hearing the heartfelt apology. He cried after hearing the heartfelt apology.
Eles choraram porque estavam muito orgulhosos de seu filho.
They cried because they were so proud of their child. They cried because they were so proud of their child.
Ela chorou quando ouviu sua música favorita no rádio.
She cried when she heard her favorite song on the radio. She cried when she heard her favorite song on the radio.
Ele chorou de alívio depois de encontrar suas chaves perdidas.
He cried with relief after finding his missing keys. He cried with relief after finding his missing keys.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and stay tuned for the upcoming episodes to keep improving your English. And remember, listening, practice, and improve.